Okay. All right. In the name of God, the most benevolent and the most merciful, in honor of the world host of this world room, in the presence of the system admin, this existential simulated system we're all in, that is simultaneously a testing zone and a divine surveillance state. Everything in reality is logged by the higher order process, and we as lower order processes are living a life here. Welcome to today's lecture, folks. I noticed something interesting. I wanted to change up what I'm talking about, and this more established an ability myself, your inner. So, in other words, human beings have the ability to who they are now in the present moment, for that to interact with their past, their sense of self in the past. I'm a I'm a what do I look like to my, let's say, younger self, and then what do I look like to my future self? I don't know, out of all the human beings on earth, hopefully if I'm recognized, they'll see, you know, that human beings on this earth, they're working for the past, they're working for the present, and there are those among us that care for the far, far future. So I envisioned myself, and I looked at my lifetime, and I wondered, okay, let's say anybody who's alive right now, let's say they don't hear my talks, okay? You know what I'm saying? Imagine if that was the case, I would still, my whole agenda behind everything is to experience and witness the most advanced potential of humanity, okay? And of course, we're all dealt our own hands. But I will say this. I looked at myself from the future, imagining if I was some kid born in the future, what would I want to hear me say? Some people are great and blessed with tons of, subscribers and followers that come and share. For me, I've reached that point where I guess I need to start asking the questions I expected the audience to ask. But it's a cool thing, because visioning myself from 1,000 years from now, listening to my own talks and wondering what do I want to know about this person, I would say I would like to know how the inner realms of this person works. So I realized that I don't know. I have a certain value to myself. I have a certain value to a couple people around me. Aside where it can have various values. That means I can have a view on on this energy that I am. So many people can have a view on this energy I am. At the end of life, it could be that it's not even in the jurisdiction of the free will. It was always in the jurisdiction of a higher order, you know. But I do consider myself, not out of ego, but out of just the definition of it, a sort of polymath. I find that I have, I'll explain what that means. This is why I felt like, okay, if I was in the future, I want to know if this guy was a polymath. So that is what I'm doing. In this lecture, I'm going to try to explain to you first what a polymath is, and then I'm going to explain to you how I experience that. Now that's the precious part of the lecture. Okay, I'm going to tell you how I solved the problems that led to this outcome. Okay. have too many tabs open. Oh, hold on, guys. Where is the thing? What? Oh, here it is. So, first I'll read a definition for you. And then I'll explain my experience with it. This might be cool for those people interested in, like, how does talent activate, or anything like that, or this in regards to, think of it this way. I'm explaining to you my views on what an art form is. I'm that human being trying to explain to you, the inner workings of, let's say, the creative output of one human model. Okay? So it says a polymath is a person who has deep knowledge and skill in many different fields, especially fields that are normally considered separate disciplines. Simple definition: a polymath is someone who's highly educated. I'm reading ChatGPT here. A polymath is someone who is highly educated or talented in multiple areas of knowledge, such as science, philosophy, art, mathematics, engineering, literature, or politics. It's not limited to those guys. Then it says the word comes. So this is called etymology. Okay, etymology. Etymology means you're looking at the history of a word. And it's so fascinating when you actually see that any field, I'll say this, I'm spilling the beans too early. I'll get to it. I'll tell you how I access the sort of what translates as a polymath state. Okay. So here's the etymology. The word comes from Greek. Poly equals many. Mathes, the word math with es, and the e has something on top of it. So poly equals many, maths equals learning or knowledge. So polymath literally means someone, I'm reading this, someone who has learned many things. Now it's academic meaning. In academic terms, a polymath is an individual whose expertise spans a significant number of different subject areas, and who integrates knowledge from those fields to produce a new understanding or innovation. That's legit the academic definition of a polymath. That also is the coolest thing to do, like the only coolest thing to do once you get bored of the past and the present looping. You have no choice. People think genius is something, oh man, that guy's genius. No, it's the same as any sort of competence developed through pressure. Okay, it is in some sense, how do I explain it to you? The cost of genius is all the selves you have ever been to see what else you can be. I don't know how to say it. There's a search there. I'll explain it in my own experience. Okay, you're listening to one person. I am not claiming any of these things. I'm just saying the output matches these. What's up, guys? Welcome to the chat. And guys, feel free to have an antithesis to my thesis, so we develop a new synthesis. What does that mean? I share views. You guys can share counter views or ask questions. And then we develop, all of us are pulled to a greater view, the synthesis. It says the key part is not just knowing many things, but being able to connect knowledge across disciplines. Famous examples of polymaths. Some famous polymaths in history equal Leonardo da Vinci. He was a painter, engineer, anatomist, and inventor. He was a bit of a weird dude. Aristotle, we have philosophy. Aristotle was a polymath. He was an expert in philosophy, biology, physics, politics, logic. Then you have Benjamin Franklin. Okay, I didn't know this. He was a scientist, inventor, writer, diplomat, even diplomat. Then you have Avicenna, a very important person in all of human history, Ibn Sina, right? Where he developed medicine, he was an expert in medicine, philosophy, astronomy, mathematics. So guys, what do we find? We find something hilarious. We find all the faculties of the educational system being within one person. To some degree, when you go back in history, what do you see? You see human beings that had a fascination for such an unknown world that they attained mastery in the realms that they explored. It says the key, now AI gives some key traits. He says, why polymaths appear more often during certain periods in history, like the Renaissance, and why modern civilization might be producing a new kind of polymath again. Oh, sorry, what am I reading? It says a polymath is a person with broad and deep knowledge across multiple fields who can connect those fields to create new understanding, pretty much, okay? So now I'm going to explain to you my personal account of how I managed to start at a certain point and throughout the years in certain fields or certain ways of looking at life, in some sense, approach a sort of control, not complete mastery. I'm someone who I am a servant of the original unconditional moment of reality. I cannot claim any power in a system that is functioning with a greater power than all of us, okay? But I want to explain to you, just in case, because I heard something, I read something a while ago that was like, it's been just chewing at me in the back of my mind, and it's been making more clear why I started giving these talks in 2014. There's a stat that'll blow your mind, that the future generations, especially in Western countries, are forgetting how to read. They can't read. They can't access the hidden worlds of information around them. Do you know? And they're just living lives of pure animate force. Like, I don't know how to explain it to you. It's very different from somebody who wants to have fun in the world and somebody who looks at the geometry, structure, the blueprint, anything. I don't care how many people you've heard say hard work or work smart and all of this. There is other variables to it, to the life process. So, let's begin with me. Let me see how I can tell you the story of my known self. When I was very young, I have a twin brother. Okay? Twins, among them, there's a quiet twin. What does that mean? That means the father's like, son, he says, kids, give me a hammer. Like, imagine your father is up the ladder, and your twin brother is the first person who goes and does this. From that moment on, your twin brother has more of an experience of being a participant in the moment, and you have more of an experience being observant. Do you know? Observing the moment. So from the beginning, when I was a twin, I was the twin. And as time went on, not just based on this, it's a very long story. I can't explain to you all that I unraveled from my childhood psychology, but I could tell you that um, I was blessed, but I was also emotional. I was enmeshed. I was, there was, I was emotional. I had emotionally invalidated myself. Okay, and that's something for a different lecture for me to explain. But anyways, I was this introverted, shy person, and I could tell you it even extended up to high school. I would talk, I would be active, I loved playing soccer, but I'm telling you, there was a part of me that didn't like myself, right? And in some sense, because it didn't like myself, I was left to either liking others, okay, and realizing because I don't like myself, I can't even like them truly, right? So I had a very complex, not very complex, but some sort of psychology to deal with, okay? But I was very introverted and shy. What does that mean? That means there would be moments, it was funny. I think when I was in grade 11, I had this thought that, yo, man, what if I don't have a personality? I'm not kidding you. You know, I thought like, yo, man, why is it that I see others so free in expressing what they are? And why am I like behind this invisible force field? Okay, that I just can't. It was as if social anxiety plus lack of self-worth plus, you know, being used to the numbness of not caring for your inner self, you know, it was as if I don't know how to tell you, for a lot of this life I feel I was just sight in a room. But then around 2011, 2012 especially, things started to change. And it was as if I was to explain to you what changes a soul, it is the great questions that find them. To me, the genius in any moment is anyone. Doesn't matter if it's 8.1 billion beings in a room or if it's two people in a room. It's anyone who can see further. That is the only test of leadership. Okay, that means if there was another person in front of me and they saw further, way further, do you know, in probabilities of what the future looks like, I would legit serve them. I would legit serve that person. Do you know? But if I see that it's hubris, then in some sense it's like a mirage in a desert. You try to grab a handful of water, but you realized it was sand. So anyways, in my youth, I'm trying to tell you, I was this kid who was, I had no problem, like I didn't even realize it was a problem. Just being nothing to yourself and not being able to, even though you're fitting in, you're playing the part, you're behaving in a way where nobody can tell if you're introverted or, you know, there's something off, like you're hiding it. I was very good at hiding myself from others. I think even I had talent in that, do you know? And the only way I had talent in it is because I think I had a very intense attention to reality. Because I don't know how to explain it to you. Sometimes this world is the outer realms is a public world, and sometimes when you are an introvert or you're someone who's more comfortable being in your own world than the world of others, do you know? At some point you realize you cannot avoid the outer realms in the same way extroverts cannot avoid the inner realms. Simple as that. You know, at some point we will realize it's a dualistic world, and duality means there's two components to look at, yo. This whole time everybody's trying to live as a good physical self. What the you know? Somebody asked me, am I a polymath? Yeah, I'm trying to explain it, man. I'm legit telling my story. I'm a polymath in this sense. I'll explain it and anybody can tell me what it is. Okay, you can define it. I'm saying it fits that definition. Okay? And I'm a very private person, just so for people to know. I have no problem. You know, there was like one of my biggest concerns was that do you know why solitude, long lengths of solitude don't bother me? I like that's one thing I want to go to, like, even therapy and figure out. Do you know? I think it's because a part of me has occupied myself with the big questions of life, so the small problems don't bother me that much. But anyways, so up to 2000, and my twin brother, guys, was his inner realms had activated from an early in our lives. I remember when we were playing like these, like I think we had these Lord of the Ring pieces, you know, like role play game, like Warhammer or something like that, but it was Lord of the Rings pieces. I remember, or even Lego. There we go. There was like Lego and whatnot. We had a cousin as well who would come and play when we were very young, right? And my twin brother had such a next level imagination of storytelling at that time, where to this day, do you know, if they ask me who is the greatest writer on earth, I will say my twin brother. My whole science fiction novel and entrance into the science fiction writing reality, like the first book I wrote, The Messenger of Giants, I wrote at the beginning, it's a tribute to my twin brother. He was a storytelling genius. Okay? But he's in tech now. He's a different type of person now. Still same level of creativity. So his inner realms had activated. He was storytelling, and me and my cousin were just capable of being characters in that story. You know? And he was capable of like directing both of our imagination. Okay, and at that time, my imagination was like I could visualize giant letters on walls. It was as if I cannot tell you. I think up to the age of 12 or 14, I wasn't in my body. Sorry, I shouldn't say, yeah, I can say that. Do you know? I wasn't in my body. I wasn't living. I was living. I was alive. I was something. I knew I was something. But it's like a deeper part of me hadn't engaged with reality yet. So up to 2000, so this is my childhood. I'm telling you, I didn't have that much of an imagination. Okay, I wasn't as creative as I am now. I wasn't a visual thinker. Do you believe that? I wasn't. My twin brother was, I believe. Do you know? I wasn't a visual thinker. I was thinking through language, through words only. Okay, not a visual thinker in the sense of visualization or a conscious effort to envision probabilities of the future. More in the sense of like I could remember what visually what happened yesterday. You know, like that. In that sense, I was a visual thinker. But in the sense of like visualizing all that. Anyways, I will answer that. You're gonna okay. Somebody in the chat section asks a great question. How did you retain what you use exactly what you use to read, watch, learn, and God? I will answer that for you, brother. I will answer that for you. And great job asking that question. Well done. Do you know that's how it starts? Okay, first I'm gonna tell you this. Hear my story. Hear out my story. The details are important. Just give me a second until the voice starts. Okay. All right, folks. I'm gonna carry on with the story. So, and keep in mind, guys, like recollection changes over time. But anyways, I was not that creative. I did not identify as a writer, as an artist, or any of that until, you might not believe it, I was in this youthful, it's hilarious when I look back at it, right? Imagine this shy, introverted kid, okay? And imagine this kid seeing the show Californication, okay? I gotta say, this is so funny, right? And I remember seeing this show Californication. This was before. This is 2010 to 11, I think. I remember seeing the show Californication, and that was like the first time in my life where I decided to embody an archetype. Okay, I legit dressed like that guy, started talking like that guy, you know. And then I thought I always liked the concept of a writer. My dad had a big bookshelf when I was young at home, and I would read those books without understanding them. It was hilarious. And in 2011, I had no sense of like spirituality and all that. Okay, I had just adopted this kind of mutated ego. I had mutated my ego towards this other ego I had found, and this ego that I had found, like this, I was trying to be like that character. I remember I was in I was visiting. I had the privilege to visit London. One of my cousins was living there, and he had a very abundant life. And I remember we were there, and at that time I didn't have the ethics I have now. I remember I drank, and I had read this quote from Ernest Hemingway: "Write drunk, edit sober." Okay, and I remember I sat there in the living room. I had opened up my iPad, and I tried to write something, and I would keep, getting drunk, and then I realized at the end of it, I don't feel good about my own soul. And I realized this isn't like who I am. It's funny, right? But I still had a fascination for writing. Now, long story short, going from 2000, this is all before the Mr. Within talks that were born on in 2014, August 29, I think. And before that, I went through a shift that only my private family saw. You know, I've said it early in my lectures where I had this experience by the river, and I suddenly began for the first time in my life being like, all right, you know, like this was a sign of my own like masculinity to myself, where I was like, okay, in this life, right, you got to attempt to solve this problem of what is the soul. Like that idea was in my consciousness, you know. And I started I had this notebook and I started really researching consciousness, you know, because I realized the idea I have myself can't be me, because I have more than multiple ideas. So I really began searching, you know. I was like that, and I don't know how to tell you. I found some. I opened up to Tibetan Buddhist literature, okay, and I broke the record on this planet in 2000, from 2012 to 2000 even 14. But at the end of 14 I was shifting a bit, but at the beginning of 14, 2000, up to those years, I was the most Tibetan Buddhist Persian guy on the planet. I legit bought these Tibetan Buddhist beads. My behavior and it's like I had shifted from that archetype, from the Hank Moody archetype, to being a Tibetan Buddhist archetype, you know. I would go in moments of like stillness that wasn't even meditation. It was just the moment I knew that had to happen. I remember going into this, at the time there was this bookstore in Canada called Chapters, and I was in such an intuitive, I was seeing synchronicities everywhere in license plates, you know, in random times, right? I had opened up to New Age literature as well in regards to so many different things, you know. I went through a star seed phase where I've talked about it in earlier lectures. And then I became someone who in 2014, or sorry, I forgot to mention. So guys, I gotta explain to you how my archetype fits into this. I'm gonna tell you about the extent of my reach, and it's nothing yet. I'm trying to expand it, but I'll tell you what I've done. Okay, in from 2000, let's say 12 to before 14, where I'll tell you where I went to give the talks, started giving the talks. I did something that astonished my family members. I did something actually that kind of freaked them out. Okay, and what I did was, but over time, I did this thing where, first of all, it started from me, like, I remember it started the first moment it happened, right? Was I was raking leaves in the back. I was living with my parents at the time. I was raking leaves. This is all before 2014. In the back, sunny day, sweating, and in my mind, I was imagining the rake of the leaf to be a spear, and for me to be like some sort of Shaolin monk or something, or you know, or someone who knows how to use a spear. And suddenly, in the middle of raking those leaves, I noticed a rhythm, an inner rhythm, another thought stream. And that thought stream, for the first time in my life, my brain was receiving poetry. My brain, I was witnessing poetry in my mind, okay? And it was something about the temple and the stars, and I was blissed out. Tears were flowing through my eyes. I was sweaty in a sunny day, you know, heart rate up, but blissed out on these endless tears coming from my eyes. After that, I unlocked automatic writing. After that, I had read this thing from Salvador Dali where he was like, he would put a spoon on his knee, and he would put a bucket, and Salvador Dali is the father of surrealism in art, right? He pretty much embodied that principle, you know, that value. And so he would be in his pajamas. He would have a canvas and a paintbrush. He would have a paintbrush in his hand in front of a canvas. He would put a spoon on his knee. He would put a metal bucket beside it anytime, and he would fall asleep in that semi-sleep state, start drawing his pictures. First of all, not only is that genius, but that's next level. Now, in my sense, I started doing this in two ways. I would lie down in bed at night, and I would hold my phone in my right hand and imagine my forearm and my elbow and my bicep creating a 90-degree angle. So my whole body is horizontal in the bed, the lights are off, I've turned on the record button, I've held the phone in my hand, and only my forearm, my body's keeping energy to keep my forearm vertical. Do you know? And my whole body's horizontal, right? Like my right hand with the phone in it, like vertical. And I remember I would, in some sense, I recorded a book called, I don't remember exactly the name. I think it was called Cationic Imprints. Do you know? In that semi-sleep state, I would wake up early in the morning. This is all before 2014 again. I would wake up early in the morning. I had put two chairs in front of one another in my room. I would put, in some sense, my laptop in one, and it's still in my pajamas. I would just go sit on that other table in front of it, turn on the laptop, press record, and just in that semi just woke up state that you haven't even washed your face and brushed your teeth, you're just like in that semi kind of morning state, I started in some sense speaking, but it was more technical. Up to before like as I got to 2014, let's say before 2014, I had done something where every day I would wake up and I would automatically speak. Okay, and the experience of it was I was standing beside myself, seeing myself speak, like just like how a public speaker speaks and you guys hear it, I was hearing myself like that. Do you know? And the automatic speech and the content, I was like witnessing my subconscious activating the jurisdiction of my consciousness. Do you know? So I'm telling you, I developed this ability to automatically express my subconscious in a conscious format. Okay, in a conscious, still being conscious. Now, I did something also, which I think now I look back at it, it's funny. I see why my parents were astonished. I started writing 10 books at the same time. Every day I would wake up and record one chapter of each. You know, I remember even there were two specific books that I wrote them back to back. Every day I would wake up and record myself speaking, and then it was a hassle to try to transcribe. You know, I had written 10 technical books up beyond 100,000 words, okay, with such unique titles, all of them from this, I called it the Divine Notes series. And it was through an automated state. Do you know that means if you tell me, do you remember exactly what you said? I'll be like, I remember myself saying it, but I don't remember exactly like the inner realm imagery. Because that's to some degree what those people think channeling is. Do you know? It's like it's just the person allowing another entity to be responsible for their inner realms. But you don't have to think of it this way. You alone have beyond the capability to activate even beyond those states, you know? You don't need help from the beyond when you haven't even noticed you are beyond. There's a quality within us. In all religions it's mentioned. What do you think the soul is? It is the secret of the origin within the simulated. So anyways, so I finished 10 books in like a very short time. Okay. And on the other side of it, okay, now the poetry extended from 2000, let's say 12 to 2016. I had written 25, I think it was 25 poetry books, something like this. And one day my brother, he would write, he had written novels, like incredible. Like my brother has a talent in world building. I see events in the world and I build the world from it. That's my sci-fi writer style. My brother can create the whole world and then create the story. This flow state, I'll just say it was, I was born in 1991. It was in 2000, before 2014. I don't know exactly. But anyways, I had finished 20, and my brother one day came up to me, right? And he's like, I went and asked dad. So he went and asked my dad, right? what have I written, right? So my twin brother went and asked my dad what I've written. My dad brought like this giant stack of papers, right? And he said he's written 100, like more than, I don't know, like whatever number it was, like 100,000, I think, poetry words. I think he did, like, aside from the technical, like it was something of such a large scale that it freaked out my brother. Do you know? But my brother had his own style of sci-fi, which was I kept telling him, like, his genius, creative genius, is, I consider, superior than mine. But my ability to endure endlessly is superior than his, I think. That's one thing about me. They're like, yo man, why aren't you giving up? I'll be like, yo man, I gotta see that version of me finishing it. I just can't, like, let it go. It's kind of OCD, I guess. I don't know. So up to, let's say, 2014, 2014, I was there, and I generated that level of content, and I had drawn like maybe 50 works of art as well. And the whole process, this is what I'm telling you. This is a Polymath's account on his own mind. Okay? That's everything I did. Everybody's like, yo, man, you got to go and become an expert in writing. Yo, man, you got to go become an expert in art. Yo, man, you got to go become an expert. I'll be like, buddy, you've lost sight of how life is happening. It's the expression of an energy. I reached a state where I wasn't creating the artwork. I was the awareness to a moment that knew how to create it. And I'm telling you, every time I would write a poem, there was just this warm emotional feeling. It was as if I was inside an inner realm moment, inner realm event. And the emotions of it, my subconscious already knew how to translate everything into words. Like, I have this theory that we're all geniuses, but subconsciously. Consciously, we're characters in the story they're telling us now, or we're telling ourselves. So then, all of this happens in 2014. I decide to, reactivate my life force and go to Birmingham City University in Birmingham, UK. With, this kid going to engineering class with Tibetan Buddhist beads on. And this sort of Franz Kafka facial hair, I was like this meditating Tibetan Buddhist Persian guy, who was studying engineering in the UK. It started from listening to lectures from Alan Watts and Terence McKenna. Fascinated through altered states by what they would say. First lecture I heard from Terence McKenna was that culture is not your friend. And that blew my mind. It's like Alan Watts. When I listened to his lecture, it was as if he was teleporting me into a sort of ancient Eastern understanding of reality. When I was listening to Terence McKenna, it was like he was teleporting me into another dimension that could be accessed psychedelically. And I don't know how people feel when they listen to me, but hopefully you feel like I'm teleporting you into the future. And my science fiction started in 2015, by the way. Before that, I didn't write science fiction. It was poetry, technical books. And anytime, and guys, you might not even know this, at that time, so I had found expression that's sort of unique. It's like, how they say to writers, like, you got to find your writer's voice. You got to find your inner voice. And when you find that inner voice, you become a writer no one has ever seen. In the same way, I'm trying to explain to you that I accessed an inner mode that I could go, and anything I do was rhythm filled. The moment knew. The knowledge was not limited to my brain. The moment knew how to happen. So I'm pretty much telling you, somebody said flow state, sure, that works. I found a flow state, and any moment I could go into that flow state. And that flow state is equivalent to, behind your eyes, having an ability to make life more like a dream that's malleable. Okay? And I don't know how to tell you. I had also unlocked geometric vision. I think I had found Plato's world of forms by then. That's one of my personal achievements. I had realized I had a designer's soul. And you don't know how and in 2014, let me tell you how the talk started. I had mismanaged my finances. I just had, the accommodation cup of tea, free cup of tea. I had my iPhone, and I had my headphone, these fake Apple headphones. And when everybody was asleep, the yard of the accommodation place had these two benches that didn't have a backrest. And I would walk on them, visualizing the grass field was millions of people. Every straw of grass on the grass field in front of those benches was millions of people, and they were listening. Millions of points of conscious reception, intelligent reception. And I just started giving these lectures, and you don't know what sort of a powerhouse I was back then. The amount, it was as if like I would just sit down, press the record button, look at the moment, and everything was there. Do you know how many people on this planet? It's probably above like 50. I think human beings on this planet have seen me like give talks, and they've been just random people passing by, and I've been in like, just giving a lecture in public. So I'm trying to tell you, back in the day, they said in ancient times they would speak in verse. They would speak in verse. Do you know what that means? They wouldn't speak like a mechanical, chronological identity, going from this to that to this to that. Do you know what I mean? Like it's more like, rather than living a life where the intelligence is sequential, you release the moment from yourself, and the moment shows you its creativity. That means back in the day, all these dudes polymaths were everyone, Everyone was a polymath. And let me tell you what happened in 2014, and extending from that, bigger and bigger questions met me. It's as if I was met by giants. Giant beings, but they were not actual giants. They were giant questions in the background of what everything meant. And I can tell you that in 2014, the name Mr.Within's gift suddenly arose in my mind, and the sentence, 10,000 talks for the betterment of mankind. And at that time, I was a person who was like, all right, I can't be Batman, but this is close enough. Years later, I found this quote online where they're like, give a man a mask and he will tell you the truth. I started identifying with an archetype that wasn't from Californication, that wasn't from Tibetan Buddhism. I began becoming a new archetype in history. That's how it felt to me. That expression, I brought it into this. Maybe in the future I'll record it. It's a cloth dance I do. I know, like I was cleaning my room, and I would throw the t-shirts like up into the ceiling. They would when I would clean my room, that's how I would clean it. I would just throw the clothing, it would hit the ceiling and then fall down into my hand, And one day it fell on my wrist, and I started spinning my wrist, and I discovered I could dance with, I don't know, I could find a rhythmic dance with cloth. I don't know how to explain it. I managed to realize it's not like you got to get into a flow state. The flow state is the natural state. And the depth of the questions is the point. Why? Because let's say Leonardo da Vinci, all that I was reading for you in regards to the like examples of polymaths, okay? Do you know like Aristotle, philosophy, or Da Vinci? Now, Da Vinci, guys, again, I'm not promoting his personality, I'm promoting his skill, okay? Da Vinci, he was a great he knew how to paint, okay? His artwork is in like the Louvre or whatnot, right? So what does that mean? He had mastered that dimension, okay? So we can tell that I don't know what the chronology is, right? But it has to have a chronology. You're not all of these at once. You have the depth of all of them at once, but you, in some sense, first go into one form, and then the of that archetype leads onto the next archetype, and then onto the next archetype. Okay, so for me, it started with writing, poetry, speaking. Sorry, poetry, dancing, and then speech, like speaking, because speaking is for those who want to convey a lot of information really fast. Writing is for those who want to design exactly that. Like writing is like being an architect, okay? Speaking is like being, some people come and move different ideas, they dance the viewpoint, I don't know how to say it. So anyways, I'm telling you, I had the ability, and because I was introverted and shy, I didn't have that much of an ego on anything, you know. And it was like I was just witnessing that when I didn't interfere with my moment of being, I already knew what to do. There's a beauty to the silent, simple presence of everything, as much as there is to an activity defining value. So Da Vinci, a big question arose in his mind. Can I paint something exactly like how it is in the outer realms, right? And he went and got an answer to that question. In regards to engineering, can I fly? Do you know what I mean? He engineered something. Do you know? In regards to anatomist, this part was a little bit creepy and weird for me. I respect the medical field, but I just, it's not for me. You know, so he would go and examine dead bodies, and I think the term is called an autopsy or something, and he would try to draw what it looks like inside the human body. So he had a deep question in his mind: what does it look like inside our human body? And he pursued that answer, whether in flow state or not. You know, and when it came to being an inventor, it's the same thing. It's all like, what if this can happen? I think that's the birth of genius. The birth ground of genius is like, yo, man, what if this could actually happen? I think that sentence is like right about to find genius, you know? So I'm trying to tell you, from one angle, you can think that there's a type of polymath that just at different points in their life, they were doing different things, sure, but you can see it's one energy being able to express itself freely in any dimension. So I am telling you that list should be longer. It's a state. To be a polymath is really means a human being has managed to find a state where energy is free before it needs to specifically be. All right, guys, I'm gonna look at the chat section now. Somebody says, what I admire is that all of this was pre-GPT. Wonderful. Yeah, and I'll tell you this, you will find this hilarious pattern. So a big question that occurred to me that I wanted to find the answer for was, how has every human being in history like looked at life? When you look at what knowledge is how different human beings have looked at life. That's it. They're like, yo, man, that guy had such incredible knowledge. It's like, sure, man, that's like one human being's view. Like every human being's view is incredible. Everybody, if they choose to write, you're a writer. If you choose to be honest and right, I'm telling you, you're a great writer. If you choose to be honest and paint, like just trust that your eyes have seen so many geometric lines and shapes and forms that every person subconsciously has enough awareness to geometry to be a genius designer. Okay, so looking at the chat section, somebody says, okay, let's go from the beginning. You're a polymath. I'm saying I'm somebody who has accessed the state that I feel in any moment I could release my ego and just watch how that moment happens. If I go in a flow state, I think it doesn't matter if it's like today. I just in this moment I discovered it with writing. Do you know? Let's say if I was born in medieval times, I might have found that flow state in swordsmanship or in archery. Do you know? If I was a prince back in the day, I would probably go and become friends with the blacksmith, you know, and learn everything about how to create, you know, the most advanced technology at the time. Somebody says, how did you retain what you used to read, watch, learn, and consume? Okay, this is the answer I found. So, you know how I told you there's big, giant questions and small tiny questions? Think of it this way. There is questions about the self and there's questions about the world, meaning that there's also answers to the self and answers to the world. I am telling you, sorry guys, that it is a state where you trust the unknown. How many people can trust the unknown? Doesn't mean trust the shapes in the unknown. It means just realize that it is not the presence of everything man has just known. There's something deeper. So the way I've learned everything is I've seen myself as this force that's just appeared on the earth, and this force when it comes to processing everything has to be capable of putting them in a singular context. That means I am aware of, I am conscious of how I've contextualized my moment, so it's all fitting in to my worldview. I integrate it into my worldview by wondering what part of that phenomena relates to my experience. I'm a visual learner, so the way I remember how to tell stories is I suddenly see those scenes like movies in my mind. Do you understand? That's what I'm saying. You know, that means I notice sentences. I've been thinking in sentences. That's a slow technology. Do you know, I started thinking in images. You got to think in images to remember and learn everything. Because if I ask you, do you remember what happened in Game of Thrones season 1? Right? You're going to know. Do you know? But if I ask you, can you tell me exactly all the words you read in a book? You're going to be like, no. Or one chapter of a book, you're going to say no. Right? So what does that mean? This is proven that we remember visuals way better than we remember language. And the way I experience reality is everything translates into a visual. This is why this is like one of my problems in a relationship, because I'm a visual learner, you know, or my inner realms are visual, right? What that means is any person who speaks around me, anything you say is visually appearing to me. You know, somebody says something nice, you know, it visually appears to me. Somebody says something ugly, it visually appears to me. You say the word apple, I see an apple. The brain translates it into an image, already having mastered how to translate it into language. Ultimately, the mastery leads to noticing the presence of the unknown. This is my finding. I'm telling you, there's even states beyond the polymath state. The polymath is just a sort of checkpoint. A checkpoint that you have an ability to trust the known world and the unknown world. Okay? Seldom is this, do they say this on the other side, if like fear dissipates through understanding, and that understanding is a new access to ability. It all depends on where attention goes. And it's a brilliant journey. And for me, knowledge is not the value. Knowledge is like based on a tiny corner of the observable universe. It's about actually, after we're done playing in knowledge, we have to confront the nature of the unknown. I think you cannot access a genius state unless you've realized there is more unknown than known. And there's way more automated events than conscious calibrated events. So this is a unique situation we're all in. It's like, what is the situationship of the species? It is, in some sense, a spaceship called Earth. We're all crew members. So I'm telling you guys, after you find that flow state, when I'm in that, in all the moments I've experienced that flow state, I was not thinking that I'm superior to the moment. No, I was pretty much just the same silent observance of the moment as I've always been in the background of the conscious moment. This is why after 2023, I realized all games of this world are conditional situations. They are conditional games. My survival is based on me adapting to the conditions of my environment. My identity survival in civilization 1.0, which is has forgotten, the true nature of man, but will remember soon, because a lion was born to roar. A lionized humanity, or in the future, an eagleized humanity. Do you know what that means? The eagle is the symbol in history of the king of the sky. It is the closest thing to a phoenix, the ancient idea of a phoenix, in regards to how they go and destroy their beaks to get a new one. And maybe peacocks could fly, back in the day. And, when they flew in the sky at a certain sunrise or sunset, the light would hit their wings and they'd be like, yo, that looks like fire. Who knows? Such a crazy theory. Anyways, dear listeners, dear members of the human species, I am not as important as the legacy of the human odyssey. The greatest service of mankind is the greatest thing he can be responsible for. Most human beings have successfully achieved responsibility of self. And as the human being ages, the game of reality is to become responsible for others, and then become responsible for your community, and then become responsible for your nation, your greater community. But now we have reached a time where human beings need to evolve again. Do you know that perspective needs to evolve again? And humanity will be based on the human's essence, the human species. That means before you feel you belong to a certain chunk of land, and just like how primitive people put paint on their face, we put paint on a chunk of land. Do you know we are the same species? This is the biggest thing. We are one species in an unknown place, that we've called Earth. All the isms are suddenly minor problems. The major problems, suddenly where philosophers understand why they are philosophers. Their soul is being called in the modern era to wonder, to take to, in some sense, push the modern era beyond the ignorance of a looping conditional reality, and in the awe of the unconditional, the advanced humanity arises. Every human being realizes their most advanced self, their advanced self is waiting for them. It all comes down to, think of it this way. Why does it matter being a polymath? Or which one does it matter? Would you rather know what the true nature of being an intelligent being in this world is, or would you rather be a polymath? And the answer is always the true nature of reality, because it's from uncovering that and having a fearlessness to see how else the world works. Genius is the birthright of any explorer. They're like, Mr. Within, how long are you going to wait for the advanced humanity? I'd be like, in my inner realms, I'm not waiting. In my inner realms, I'm going to the furthest reaches of to envision the future in my inner realms as events. I've lived 12,500 days on this planet. Do you know what that means? That means I had 12,500 times I've logged into this world, conscious waking state, and been like, yo, another new day, another new self. After some point, you see that it's this not terrifying, but it's this horrific view, and you suddenly realize, my God, I have accepted a loop. That was the biggest heartbreak for me at some point. The biggest way I broke my own heart. I realized I had lingered in a loop too long. I'm pretty much saying, in these 12,500 days, I've become incredibly bored of looking at it throughout the day and just giving it a limited value based on its past and my impressions of that unknown being's past. Like, at some point, you have to kind of like get real and be like, they told us to be honest. We're honest. There's more unknown than known. We're being present through it all. So in other words, we're more unknown than known, but we've limited human civilization to only the known through the tool of language that we have used so long that we've forgotten it's not us. This is a modality of life, folks. There's so many ways civilization can be built. This is just the first prototype. This is the best our ancestors could do. But what about us? Why are we here? Are we here to just survive? Who the F convinced everybody life is only about personal survival? That makes no sense. Why then are all of us here in the same room? Why is it that in front of my eyes, I find myself in a three-dimensional, physical, like a MMO, like a public server map, okay, where we're all in the same room? Like, why? Right? And behind my eyes, I am in my own inner realm, and everybody else is in their own inner realm, and they're living an inner life that nobody else can see. Just because I speak, it doesn't mean you understood where the force came from. All right, guys, I'm gonna keep. Let me honor the chat sections and keep going. Somebody says, pursuing, you were trying to get at the root of monoism. Were you able to find an answer to, in quotations, even if there's one and not many, but does that one exist at all? Great to know about your budding years. I'm not sure what budding means in that sense, but oh, like awakening state, you mean? Yeah. Thank you. You're asking me, even if there's one and not many, but does that one exist at all? Think of it this way. I'll give you my take on this in this moment. Imagine we're 8.1 billion human beings inside a box. And you're asking me, let's say, even if there's one and not many, but does that one exist at all? Okay, so the first part of it is you're saying even if there's one and not many, but does that one exist at all? Let me tell you my finding. If you're Christian, that one exists on earth in a human form, but it's in a trinity. I don't know if Christians see God the Son equal to God the Father. I am Muslim, a Muslim futurist, and the way I see it is that truth the unconditional cannot equal the conditional. So it's in some sense, when I use the term system admin, the system admin is not limited to the world room. It's beyond the world room. It created the room. It was as if, how did the world story actually begin? There was an original unconditional moment of being. And through the imagery of instantaneous command, give me a second, guys. I am so thirsty. Okay, think of it this way. We're inside an existential simulated system. There's a system administrator that is beyond the system. There are mods that are created beings inside the system that we can't see, but they moderate sectors of reality, let's say. They have authorization. And then there's us as users. So users and mods, created beings. And then in some sense, the system admin is an unconditional, meaning uncreated being. So the original causal point of all reality through monotheism is an unconditional original moment. So the system admin is beyond the world room. There's mods in this room, and then there's users, and the system to the system admin, which is an unconditional being outside of the box we're all in, okay, and can't equate anything in the box, can't be limited to the equation of anything in the box. It's like I'm saying the creator is beyond creation. Creation is being tested, whether it listens to the mods or if it directly goes back to the system admin. And the way you go back to the system admin is having unconditional faith to the whole moment in how it's being. So I would say that God to me is like the system administrator that is beyond the world room. Islam tells you directly go to the system admin. Christianity tells you go to the embodiment of God on earth in the simulation, right? But here's the thing. From the human perspective, I cannot see Christ as God, but from God's perspective, God can do anything, can become, I guess, his own son, you know? In Islam, it is said that we do not know the unseen. Therefore, Muslims need to learn to not judge the unseen as well. All religious people do, actually. The unseen is in the jurisdiction of the higher power. This is the way I've managed to explain this to people. Guys, it's a simulation. The lower order processes are simulated. The singular higher order process is original. So think of it this way. There's countless simulations of an original Earth. Hilariously, there's countless simulations of an original world. Hilariously, not hilariously, reverently, there is countless simulations to an original moment. We are one of those simulations. But there is something within us that is connected to the original. And this is why the greatest sages, if you go in ancient times, they had even states beyond being a polymath. It was as if they would see through the heart. They would unlock the chambers of the heart. It wasn't magic, it was divinity. It was see, the difference between magic is that the self is doing something for the self. The difference between divinity is that the self is in the presence of the higher power. You know, in Islam, there's one of the most beautiful stories I've heard in my life. You know, and I will share this. I don't remember exactly what surah it's from, but I'm a visual learner, so I remember the imagery. There's a moment in the Holy Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, where the Prophet Moses, Musa alayhi salam, peace be upon him, goes to God and says, God, I have a bad relationship with the Pharaoh, and isn't it better if you send my brother Aaron, Prophet Aaron, peace be upon him? And he also had a leprosy issue or something, I believe. And so God says, no, both of you go. Don't worry about it, both of you go. And so Prophet Moses, peace be upon him, and Prophet Aaron, peace be upon him, both of them go to confront the Pharaoh. And it's such an incredible moment, because Prophet Moses begins explaining to the Pharaoh the superiority of the one true God beyond all conditional angles, that which is the creator of all angles, right? And the Pharaoh is not convinced.
Okay.
They go up to the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh isn't convinced. The Pharaoh gathers around all the magicians, and also Prophet Moses, peace be upon him, his leprosy was resolved, you know, and he had this staff though. They bring all the illusionists, all the archetypes of magic at that time, and they bring it, and the magicians and illusionists, they create some sort of illusion of like snakes. And the Pharaoh says, like, okay, can you do better than this? You know? And God commands Prophet Moses, peace be upon him, to throw his staff. And Prophet Moses is just there in pure faith, just like, okay, I'm here. And he throws his staff, and it turns into an actual serpent, as if something that could happen through the command of the creator of the realm. Do you know? Something that was authorized to happen, and that snake eats all their illusion snakes. And this is why this is such a beautiful story. All the magicians, all the manipulators, all the egos at that time immediately bow. The magical manipulative ego bows, because they understand this is a higher power. That's the thing about divinity. When divinity arose, when the prophets breathed in this world, the realms of magic shook. And as the prophet, as the poet and self-conscious being Hafiz said, that when the prophets entered the world, it was like the sky poured light. I don't know if it was Rumi or Hafiz, one of them said this. That means magic and the limited life of the ego became obsolete when divine command entered the vicinity of human consciousness. Anyways, moving on from that story, the whole point of it was, man is not alone. We are in the attention of the higher power. In the same way an ant on a podium of a politician doesn't understand the speech, but in some sense has reached the moment to notice it's in the view of a higher order process. I'm telling you, what is the value of talent? It is what is the value of being a genius or a polymath or anything like that? What is the value of competency? You serve your own life, you only saw it. You serve the life of your species, the hidden honor that should have been here by now. That means parents start raising their children, and the children's like, yo, what kind of world are we in? And the parents not gonna be like, you're in an effed up, messed up, world you can't trust. You just tell your children, you're in a world that only knows how to do it like this, and is waiting for humans to come and lift us into the transnationalistic, supranationalistic era, where all nations are sub-nations to the nation of humanity. Where there's a United Species Council, there's a United Species Day, where all those politicians of nations who were at war suddenly realize, yo, this podcaster has a point. Because the resource allocation is troublesome because of group identity. Yet all these groups are part of the same group. When you look in the mirror, you're all members of the human species. So we have to care for things from the perspective of the human species, and then filterize our individual life through that. I'm telling you, talent, skill, competence, all of these flow states, all of this is just it's like the retaliation of a soul that is fascinated by all that is unknown in its moment. Beyond the egos that could claim reality only for a limited time. It's the performance of the presence of the soul. Your soul is performing in every moment. You are the awareness of the whole moment. And your body is found within your moment of awareness. I'm telling you, what from one angle may look like polymath, from another angle is just one part of the mountain. Do you know a conscious being is climbing to discover the true nature of why it's so vast? That means if they're like, Mr.Within, do you have a question in the afterlife from the system admin? I'll be like, okay, God, why did you show me such a gigantic, vast world? Like, you could have made it smaller and it still would have been functionable. Why did you show us such majesty? Like, you guys don't understand. They're like, yo, man, why did ancient people believe in heaven? Guys, there was no light pollution. In the evenings and at night, they were in the presence of the Milky Way galaxy. And they couldn't explain it. They knew they were stars, but they couldn't explain why such light was in their sky and unreachable. And this is why a vast amount of human ideology centers around light. And I don't know if people know this from the Islamic theological lens. There's three, it's known that there's three kinds of beings. Those beings that are made of light, they're known as angels, present in the higher realms, functioning through divine will. And then there is humans who are made of this clay. And then there is the jinn kind that are made of a smokeless flame. And in Christianity, they see the fallen one used to be an angel, but in Islam, they see the fallen one was a jinn, and that jinn had angelic status, but was not created as an angel. And anyways, the whole point of it was that we are being tested by an anti-human force moderator, but at the same time, everything's being administered by the system admin. And the test is like, God is like, okay, if I was to simplify it, God is saying like, yo, everything's under control. And then the anti-human force, the anti-human moderator is saying, no, nothing's in control. You got to take control, And then at the same time, the users are like, whoa, what do I do? And the users must realize, in the same way the value of honesty is to access original data, on some level we want to access the original information of reality, the original presence of reality. It's as if what is everyone drawn to the original presence of life. That's how we know we're simulated. We're fascinated by our origin. If we weren't simulated, we'd know our origin. Anyways, let me go down the question list, the chat section. Somebody says, I answered that. How old are you when you were experiencing? I said that. Somebody says, I won the lottery. Good job, man. You know, serve civilization if you're capable. It's all about if it's like egos are trying to show off how smart they are, and one ego's like, I've become responsible for 1,000 years in the future, and another ego's like, yo, that's nothing. I've become responsible for 1,000,000 years in the future. That means we need especially the younger generations, and there's going to be a science fiction renaissance. There's going to be a futuristic renaissance on Earth. We're getting close to it. I'm feeling it maybe in the next 20 to 50 years. Okay, we go to the next comment. How do we initiate and get into that state? I know dealing with a lot lately in my life, and I desperately need to mend things. I mean every single letter of that word when I say desperately. All right, man. So let me first tell you this. Calm down, or you're gonna be in a reactive. You're gonna see things through a reactive lens. So the first thing is letting the ripples of the moment settle. Okay. So first, just chill out, be super still, you know, and just calm down. You got to be calm to be able to manage things. Okay, so first thing is be calm, and it's not about, see, the approach that I need to get into a flow state to change my life is not the correct. I don't think that's the right way to look at it. You got to look at it as if it took us 4.5 billion years, 13.8 billion years to get here. Okay, nobody like you exists. Nobody has your DNA. Nobody knows how you're seeing everything behind your eyes. We all find ourselves in an outer realms where ultimately we're explorers of. It is more unknown than known. Okay, and in the middle of this simulated reality where we're physically here for some time, do you know what is the greatest actions that human beings are doing? Being responsible of the past, being responsible of the present, do you know, and then being, what's left is being responsible for the future. You know, and the future is actually a way you come into contact with the unknown. The whole point of it is, how advanced are we really? And it's really a difference between the concept of epistemology and ontology. Epistemology is how we know things, you know, how we know things to be true, and ontology is what is truth really. And it's that realization in man. I'm not like, if you want to get into a flow state, stop thinking about a flow state, stop caring about it. You know, for a moment, just ask yourself a deep question. Like, ask yourself, okay, man, who am I to get into a flow state? Why do I want to get into a flow state? What is a flow state? Do you know? Like this dude in his podcast is saying, he just, like, it was as if the moment knew before he did. What does that mean? Do you know? So I'm telling you, bro, don't try to live through the, like, let me tell you, it's like this gigantic mountain. Once you realize that nobody has your viewpoint, you also realize you can see the problem and the solution differently than anyone else. Don't worry about it. Just be simple, honest, and in some sense, make the intent and have faith in it. But I'm telling you, you don't. It's not. You're not lacking any. What you're lacking is not to be a cool, be like a more advanced concept. You're lacking an advanced view on the context of your life. How do you know you're not in a flow state right now? How do you know it's not as simple as just chilling out and realizing before you do anything the moment's happening? Somebody in the chat section says, I'm a 32-year-old female with muscular dystrophy. I too have a thing for surfing and scrolling and studying esoteric monistic stuff. You name it, and I've exposed myself to it, albeit at a source level. Unemployment hurts, and what hurts even more is that I am not studying for an exam which can resolve my unemployment peril forever. But I'm not able to work at all. I'm all stuck in analysis paralysis. Okay, if you have an exam, let me tell you this. You gotta ask yourself, okay, like, You gotta ask yourself, like, okay, only way, I'm not like an expert student, okay, but the way I learn things quickly is, one, I wanna know what's going on in that sector of reality. And if I can go figure out what its root geometry is, where all those ideas are starting from, like, and you gotta go read the history and become aware also of the language of that field, the terminology of that field. So I'm telling you, if you have an exam and you're stuck in analysis paralysis, is because you're processing multiple applications at once. You need to just forget everything. If you're unemployed, that means you have time. And I want you to just, I don't know, maybe in whatever state, you think is best in your outer realms, right? To for a second be like, yo, man, what are these guys saying? That's the way I study. I'm like, okay, so a bunch of dudes have made some claims about what's going on in this part of reality. Why? And I'm telling you, when you become fascinated in the history and the evolution of the idea, then you, in some sense, have access to communicating about the idea. So I'm telling you, let me tell you a story, okay? Anybody on Earth who has to study for an exam, okay, or they have an exam, important exam coming up, I'm going to tell you a story that years ago in my youth, this math teacher told the classroom, okay? And this math teacher said this story that he was in university, and he was in the most advanced university for physics and math in Iran, and he had this final exam for his physics, right? Which was the hardest physics exam in the country, okay? And he said he was so obsessed with playing soccer that he found himself he had messed up like his awareness of the schedule, right? And he found himself legit like having a 1 day to study for that exam, okay? And he told us that he was telling all the kids who would cram, like, he was saying that this is what he said. He said that that whole night he just spent his whole time trying to solve the hardest question in the exam and learning everything about it, how as a concept it fits into a specific context, how many different ways they're looking at it. Anything you're fascinated by, you learn instantly. I'm not kidding. You got to find a way to be fascinated by this. Like, do you know, it's like life has brought an opportunity of expertise. Like, dive in and explore that reality and realize, anything you look at, it's like a privilege both for that field and for you. Okay, I'm going to keep going down the comment section. Somebody says, I've written, and in regards to, somebody says, with muscular dystrophy, give me a second, I got to look that up. But I can assume what it is. Okay. Oh, okay, I see what it is. Okay, I understand. First of all, like, every moment of your life, honor that moment you're in and try to become aware of why it's positioned that way. Games are usually won by positioning. Okay, so wonder about, like, in the same way you can have a negative view on whoever you are, you can have a positive view, and there's honestly countless ways and moments in the space-time continuum that we can look at things from, right? So you can choose to judge yourself and loop in that judgment, or you can choose to see there's so many infinite ways to judge yourself, you know? That means, hey guys, good news. You don't need to be depressed any longer because there's infinite ways to be depressed. And guys, anybody who admires the work I do, try to get on Discord and help me build a community, yo. I don't know how to do it. Okay, we go to the last thing in the comment section. Somebody says, I've written a piece on self-exploration. What am I? Who am I? Could relate to it. Can I share? It says, can't share it with known peeps. Anything you want to share, you can email me. If it's something you want, you can email me. But I think, honestly, don't email me. Keep it to yourself. Is it fully evolved? If the idea is not fully evolved, don't share it yet. So if what you've written is not complete, I would say be patient and maybe share it vocally on Discord or somewhere. What you've written, like in a poetry event or something. I don't know, whatever, like some sort of philosophical discussion event. Okay, I have honored the chat section. Now back to this. Guys, all of this is leading me to say that they're considering in the last 300,000 years that the civilizational project began, there has been around 117 billion human beings that have, natural, original human beings that have existed on Earth. 8.1 billion of them are alive, meaning that 7% of all humans that have ever existed in this 300,000 estimated range, 300,000 year estimated range, are alive right now. We are right now the original class. I find, as a futurist, I find honor in this, that I am a biological being. I find honor. I know that in the future generations, they will study 2000, excuse me guys, and they will study in 2025. They will study, not 2025, they will study 2026. And they will be like, look at their time. They were so free. They could make mistakes. They could not know. They could just play. Do you know? Anyways, guys, I'm telling you, it's a matter of concentration as well. Anything you concentrate on, you can access the depth of. It is your choice if you want to be present as an unknown moment of being and witness all the different content come and go, or if you want to just identify with specific elements that are interdependent to one another in the system. Meaning is circular. This is what they don't tell you. They're like, reality doesn't make sense. Yeah, because from a singular circular understanding, we want to understand a straight line. What is freedom? All these people being like, liberty, freedom. I think ultimately it comes down to the freedom of being a human being. The next great renaissance in human psychology is identifying not with a chunk of land again, with the human species. You are humans on Earth, and the deeper game is you're unknown beings, 8.1 billion unknown beings, and unknown forces of life that are moving a body in a known way because they have used language to live in a smaller simulation of meaning. So in other words, language, they're like, yo man, they are like in a humorous way, Monty Python way or something, in a silly way. It's like our ancestors opened their eyes. They're like, yo guys, this world is too big and it doesn't make sense. Okay, let's make it make sense and tell our own stories. And they started naming each other, and then the subjective domains of mankind began expanding. There's so many ways to look at life, but ultimately I am just someone who's like, yo man, every person I've seen, I've been judging them based on their past. What the F? This whole time I could judge them not only just from their present, who they are, I could judge them based on who they could be. That means I lived a long time not seeing the potential in my species. I only saw and cared for the potential of myself, and that was an error. Wasn't an error, it was boring at some point. It's honestly like we honored the past by maintaining the present, and we honored the future by going forward in time. It's all about consciously living as a known being at first in a known world, then realizing you're actually consciously an unknown being in an unknown world. And it's been an incredible storytelling operation that the whole species is identified with, and this simulation is important, but it is a tool. It is one part of reality. It is not all something that can contain all of reality. There's a reason the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein said, "The limits of my language are the limits of my world." There's a reason the poet Hafez from 800 years ago said, "The words you speak become the house you live in." That this is a tool, this is a technology that human beings could look at an object, make it simultaneously equivalent to a language, and make that language simultaneously equivalent to an image. But what is true advancement in a reality that is beyond our understanding? That means there's a system administrative process handling everything. Then we zoom in a bit, there's a moderative force active in the realm, and then we see us as users. And these users can choose to believe that they are their own creators, which is naive, that it's kind of noob, or they can in some sense choose to realize that, okay, let's do an intelligent interaction level reality check. And so how do we find intelligence? When we wake up, even right now as I'm speaking, it's like first person point of view, and in some sense, and guys, let me tell you this, by the way, any illness, I think the way I know of a healing method is that you have to realize you're an unknown being. You're not the idea of that you have. You're an unknown moment. The ideas come and go. And you can in some sense communicate to your body. You could be like, "What are you doing? Heal, yo." And then just in some sense chill out. I am telling you, it's a liberating state to realize you're an unknown force interacting with an unknown moment, and the story of what's been going on has been changing through this whole time. And how do you catch these inner rhythms? So when I come to give these talks, the title is an inner vision. It's like I'm seeing something in the furthest reaches of my awareness. And then when I start talking to it, everything I'm saying, it's like I'm either walking closer to it or I'm walking away from it or in tangent to it. But ultimately, I'm walking to that destination I see in my inner realms, which is pretty much what fascinates me. I'm sharing what fascinates me, pretty much. Anyways, folks, thank you for listening. I really, it's still a mystery who the real audience of these talks are. But a part of me is speaking to everything, including being aware that I am in the presence of an original power. But I am a simulated user. And life is too big to be understood, so that means we're here to do something specific. We're here to play our part. It's role-oriented more than... It's like the purpose of life is validated more through living it as a role than in some sense validated through it like a specific story summation. And speaking from the ether was the ancient view that there was something known as a logos, where it was like this higher being was living through all of us on earth. And the logos was present in like all ancient traditions had this view of a spirit realm and a normal realm, like a starting realm and a spirit realm. Okay. And in some sense the ether was the relationship of the spirit realm with the normal realm, with the material realm. So speaking from the ether, I'm telling you, I'll give you a simple example. First of all, anybody who wants to be a writer in Mr. Within's writing school of thought, I would tell you this: go buy a printer stack of paper, put it on a table. If you have a circular table, put it in the center. If you have vertical, make sure the geometry is perfectly in line. Okay, buy a new pen, and an ink pen, which has like a very thin, like, it's kind of like a tiny thin marker. Buy one of those pens, put it on top of that stack of printer paper on a table you pass by often, and do not touch that pen and that piece of paper, okay, until you have witnessed something or felt you have found a moment that nobody else has seen before. Right? That piece of paper, even if you get a phone call and you have to take notes, you don't touch that. You try to write it on the back of a tissue box. You know what I mean? You don't touch that stack of paper and printer unless you have a thought or a vision or an inner realm event, or you see something in your inner realms that you're like, okay, I have to write this because I don't want to forget this the next day. And that's when you start writing. Do you know? And I'm trying to tell you, train yourself by becoming fascinated. I'm someone who has explored various viewpoints, and my conclusion is fascination with the unknown is the end, is the result. We are outgrowing the stories that covered our eyes for too long. It is about the responsibility. Let me tell you, people think religion isn't advanced. Let me tell you, it's very advanced, like strangely very advanced. There's this view that if you truly want to be responsible for your past, you got to be responsible for your present. And then if you're not responsible for your present, you don't feel responsible for your past. So the way to manage the past is by managing the present. But the way you manage the present is by managing the future, the vision of the future you have. But the way to manage the vision of the future, that's up to the secular point. The religious point is by wondering about the after life of the future. Do you understand? The after world. So in other words, the way you prepare for the future is by having faith in the original moment that all simulated realities will return to. Where else can they go? Anyways, folks, it surpasses human ideology. We have been unknown beings in an unknown world, and it is a privilege because we see it in the just like if you were to go and sign up for a gym, you would need a gym membership card. Well, guess what? When you look in the mirror, you are seeing the membership card to the human species. The human species surpasses any idea that an individual human being has. It surpasses all of those values. It is the realization that, we got to start caring for how human beings are not just physically alive. How are they experiencing reality? There needs to be the integration of technology from all the technology-centered areas of the world to everywhere. Do you understand? And same with nature. Do you understand? Our ancestors did the best they could. They gave us an industrial, urbanized reality, civilization. And now it is up to us that through the advent of the internet being some sort of nervous system of the species, and every nation being like a part of the unified brain of the united species, it is all about opening the doors of the most advanced realities to all realities. Even in the Holy Quran, there is a verse, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, that says, man is a Khalifa, means he's an ambassador of the divine attributes of the system admin. We're not here to just be a human that survived. The very ultra-conscious human is actually realizing that behind nature's laws is divine command source code. Faith is the ultimate station, but then the ultimate station of faith is faith in the unknown. The thing that is really, no, it's the most uncommon thing to imagine people doing. Faith in the unknown, no. I'm a specific self. I need a specific conditional reality to accept myself in it. It's like, relax, bro. Everybody knows that they have been watching every thought they've ever had before they've said it. They've been watching all the different views they have had to something before expressing as it. And so the greater mystery of reality, to trust this world and not fear the unknown, the era of the conscious understanding begins. The era of the conscious understanders of the unknown. Okay, that's kind of like, I don't know, maybe semi-cool way of saying it. Anyways, folks, thank you for listening. I hope this lecture was insightful. Think of it this way. If you doubt yourself, there's infinite ways to doubt yourself. If you look down on yourself, there's infinite ways to look down on yourself. If you look up at yourself, there's infinite ways to look at yourself. When it comes to trusting yourself, you can say there's through different infinite conditional angles you can trust yourself, but ultimately the unconditional part within you needs to realize the brilliance and beauty of the unconditional moment. It's deeper than human psychology, folks. I'm trying to, like, smoothen it a little when I communicate. But the reality is, the unknown has been waiting for us to consciously engage it again. And the unknown is not fictional archetypes. It is the realization that the moderators can do whatever they want, the users can do whatever they want. But ultimately, there are those who realize the system, the administrator of the system that is beyond, that is unconditional, beyond the world room, already knows how everything has happened. It is us that don't know. The simulated can't see beyond time. The unconditional original knows way beyond how we were simulated in time. So really, it's not about being a human being on Earth anymore. It's about realizing you're in an unknown moment of being interacting with an unknown world. So think about the force that moves your body, and think about the potential of the force that could move the whole cosmos. And for us to be able to comprehend it, they're like, give me proof. Even though I'm in a tiny corner of the observable universe, but give me proof, goddammit. And at some point you just look at those people and be like, yo, man, you need to prove it to yourself how limited we are. And that's the point. The true scholarship, I believe, begins when you're wondering about beyond the limited. Anyways, thank you for listening. In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful, and the most advanced, in honor of the original system admin of this existential simulated system we're all in the divine surveillance state. And so the greatness of humanity, it awaits. This whole time between good and evil, there's been a third option, the advanced. Put the word advance in front of every idea you've ever known, and then you'll realize how, from what future Mr. Within is talking about. Regardless of a time traveler's ego for the sake of speech, it was unknown, not just at the end, but from the beginning. We are witnesses of the brilliance of the most grandest unknown event that we've managed to just notice the shoulder of the giant. The greatness of the world will activate such greater skills. In the same way you can wonder about, yo man, who could I be in this world? In the same way you can wonder, what could this world be? I'm somebody who is awestruck by there being a moment where I try to imagine what would 8.1 billion advanced beings, their most advanced potential activated, and all in the most advanced purpose, like unified, like what would that look like? And it was such a great vision that I realized the past has denied how great the future is for too long. And it's like beyond the fear that we haven't chosen to actually understand. We were not just humanity. We were the wonder, the greatest wonder of the world. That which saw what it actually was. We are the creation of the highest, being tested in the lowest, not in the lowest, but in the low. in the lowlands. And once you realize the pure lands, it's as if God was in the room before the world was. The unconditional original power was there before any conditional reality came to shape anything. What is greatness? An ability to understand what we're standing on under is not just limited to our meaning. Meaning comes from within. Meaning is a fictional event, actually. What we treated as non-fiction. Anyways, folks, thank you for listening. There's so much for us to still know, in honor of the greatest mankind. The greatness of our species. Rise, mankind, rise in the presence of the one and only, the original power. There's a scene, I posted it in the community section. It's like a Warhammer scene, cinematic, where there's this Black Templar knight. He falls down and then he looks at the sky, and in the lore of like Warhammer, I don't know how to explain it really. I don't know that much, but in that scene, the guy's like, the Emperor is like some transcendental being or something, and the guy's like, Emperor, give me power one last time to defeat your enemies. And suddenly there's the statue of the Emperor, and behind it arises this halo of light, and suddenly the Emperor says, rise, my son, or something like that. Son of Gullivan or something. I don't know. He says something like that. I don't remember exactly, but then this guy suddenly is like, a light enters him, this soldier, and he goes and defeats the enemies. And then he dies. And to me, even though that's just a video game cinematic, but the metaphysical suggestion that the species is not alone. And and trusting the creative force that knows, the original creative force and command that knows better, is an accomplishment. Anyways, guys, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the talk, like if you want to help me out, go ahead and like follow my, like go on Discord and like help me build a community. And I started this gaming channel to play Cyberpunk 2077. And I don't know, it's kind of like also, I guess, my experience into a stand-up career. Not joking. But anyways, go and follow these. And at the same time, wonder about the depths of reality beyond any human idea. Have a great day. Thank you for listening. In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful, and the most advanced. In honor of the original moment that all conditional moments have arisen from and will return to. Thank you.